Good evening, and I'm Anna Kalczyńska. You're watching World News Tonight, coming to you from Warsaw on TVP World. And we'll begin with a breaking news. President Biden has allowed Ukraine to strike Russia with long-range missiles inside the country. Russia has carried out one of its biggest aerial attacks today on Ukraine in months. Moscow's missiles struck areas close to the border with Poland, prompting authorities to scramble fighter jets. Authorities in Warsaw said they would shoot down any missile flying towards Poland. More on that in a moment, but first let's take a look at tonight's headlines. In a meeting with the outgoing US President Joe Biden, Xi Jinping said he would cooperate with Donald Trump. Poland's ruling party holds primaries this week as candidates from across the political spectrum gear up for a presidential election early next year. And the Energa Camerimage Film Festival in Toruń has begun. However, it was not without controversies. And we begin with breaking news. President Joe Biden allows Ukraine to strike Russia with long-range U.S. missiles. That reports the New York Times, citing American officials. With 2 months left in office, the president, for the first time, authorized the Ukrainian military to use the system known as ATACMS to help defend its forces in the Kursk region of Russia. And we're not moving to Kiev to our correspondent Oz Katerji. Good evening, Oz. What more do we know about the case, and how groundbreaking is this decision for Ukraine?
Well, this is very big news indeed for Ukraine. This is something Ukrainian officials have been pushing for months now. They've long claimed that they have the inability to target Russian forces inside Russia to do deep strikes has hampered them, has been like fighting the war with one arm tied behind their back. They've often made the metaphor that it's wrong to shoot the arrow when you can shoot the archer. A big problem, for example, glide bombings that have been targeting Kharkiv in recent months. The Ukrainians claim that they could prevent many of those by striking at the airfields responsible for many of those glide bomb attacks. Now, this is the last 2 months of Biden's term in office, so it's unclear how many ATACMS Ukraine will be given in the future, if they'll be given any indeed. So Ukraine has a limited supply of them. But this does now open up targets within about 300 kilometers from Ukraine's borders or from Ukraine's frontline positions that they can now target using these weapons. Now, as I said, they do have a limited amount of them. It's unclear if they're going to be given any more going forward. But for the time being, this is a huge diplomatic, political, military success for Ukraine, for them to be able to target these forces that are attacking them deep inside Russia. Now, U.S. officials haven't officially confirmed this yet. They're just briefing this to the press. They've briefed Reuters, they've briefed the Washington Post and the New York Times now. So it's being widely briefed. We're still waiting for official confirmation from the White House. We're still waiting for official confirmation from Kyiv. No word, but this is a still developing story that will bring you more of that on TVP World in the coming hours. Now, we do understand this decision was brought about in response to the announcement that North Koreans would be joining the fight in Kursk. So we remain to see over the coming days and weeks whether this decision will have any impact on the front lines. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Oz. As we hear, there's still no official comment from Ukrainian authorities, but please stay tuned to TVP World, and we will brief you on that as soon as it comes. And we continue with the topic of Ukraine with the fallout of Chancellor Scholz's phone call with the Russian president. As missiles and drones rain down on Ukrainian cities in Russia's largest attack in months, Kiev's top diplomat called it Putin's answer to those who called him. Also, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk said on Sunday that nobody will stop Putin with phone calls. Franciszek Pilis reports.
Skies above Kiev roared as Ukrainian anti-air systems sprang into action, defending the capital from a swarm of Russian drones and missiles. Some Ukrainians took it upon themselves to deal with the targets. Thankfully, according to reports from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, no one in Kyiv was killed in the attack, as Ukrainians young and old took shelter from the attack underground. After 2 years of constant threat of death from Russian missiles and drones falling from the sky, Ukrainians have learned to hide whenever sirens ring out through their cities.
About 5 minutes after the air raid alert started, we heard a loud whistle and a bang. This explosion probably caused a piece of shrapnel to hit the roof and pierce the concrete ceiling.
After the commotion died down, all that was left to do was come back up to the surface and assess the damage.
The explosion rang over there, but the missile fell here. I thought it was the Vidibuchi neighborhood. I called everyone I knew to find out. Then I thought it must have been somewhere here. But where exactly? If there had been a fire somewhere in the nearby buildings, everyone would have known. But no one expected this.
Kyiv, however, wasn't the only city to witness the Russian overnight onslaught. Mykolaiv saw 2 women killed and 6 more people injured in the attack. According to Ukrainian military officials, Russia used almost 120 missiles and 90 suicide drones to bombard the whole of the country, including the port of Odessa, causing a power outage in the region.
I'm in Odessa, where we are without almost the whole city is without electricity, without water supply, without heating. Electrical transport doesn't work. Schools will not work tomorrow. So the situation is bad.
Other regions that sustained the damage in the Russian strikes were the Volhynia region and the city of Sheptytsky, located close to Ukraine's border with Poland. Warsaw, which has previously seen Russian missiles cross into its airspace, responded to the potential threat by scrambling its fighter jets.
Any missile that is headed towards Poland will be shot down.
In response to Russia's massive wave of attacks, Ukraine's foreign minister Andriy Sybiha had some bitter words to share with anyone thinking of striking a deal with Moscow to end the war.
This is the real answer the war criminal Putin is giving to all those who recently called or visited him. We need peace through strength, not compromises.
The Ukrainian foreign minister's comment followed a phone call on Friday between Vladimir Putin and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, the first one of its kind since December 2022.
I'm not saying that the call of Olaf Scholz was the source of this attack today, definitely not. But at least we can say that this call has not prevented Putin from this awful attack against civilian infrastructure this morning.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk also chimed in on social media to comment on the situation.
No one will stop Putin with phone calls. The attack last night, one of the biggest in this war, has proved that telephone diplomacy cannot replace real support from the whole West for Ukraine. The next weeks will be decisive, not only for the war itself, but also for our future.
But what was the reason behind Olaf Scholz's phone call? According to the German Chancellor, it was to reiterate Europe's support for Ukraine's complete sovereignty.
The conversation was very detailed, but it made us realize that the Russian president's views on this war have not changed much, which is not good news.
This comment lines up with a recent report by Politico saying the EU will pressure China over its alleged involvement in supplying Russia with military-grade drones. While this news is concerning to all who would like to see Ukraine free of Russian troops, it's not fully confirmed, as EU diplomats said the bloc would have to conduct a deep investigation into these claims to see if Beijing had abandoned its position of neutrality in the war. Despite opinions that the war could end soon due to political pressure, the recent wave of Russian attacks proves otherwise, as Ukrainians are forced to bury their dead, both those wearing military uniforms and those wearing civilian clothing.
While the current U.S. administration has had its conflicts with Beijing, U.S.-China relations are approaching an especially bumpy road as U.S. President-elect Trump is set to take office and Europe risks being caught in the middle. Michiel van Blumenstein reports.
Donald Trump has never made a secret of his foreign policy priorities.
Because China's eating our lunch right now.
China.
I want to beat China. And by the way, China has to pay us retribution. We should all declare within one unified voice that China must pay. They must pay.
It also shows through his nominations for top foreign policy positions. Incoming Secretary of State, the US equivalent of Foreign Minister, Marco Rubio, has been sanctioned by China for his open criticism of Beijing in the US Senate. If that holds in his new role, he wouldn't be allowed to travel to the country. Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, and CIA chief pick, John Ratcliffe, have been vocal China critics in the US House of Representatives. A new trade war with China would be tempting for Washington. The last one cost the US an estimated $18 billion. But for Beijing, it was $38 billion. Trump also wants to reverse the trade deficit, foreign policy expert Mike Toth notes.
He's probably also eyeing that China overall, in terms of all of its trading partners, has a $1 trillion trading advantage, a surplus, if you will, and he wants to whittle that down.
Beyond the US foreign policy focus shift away from the region, a trade war would have immediate consequences for Europe. According to some commentators, European countries may have to start picking sides.
I think you're also probably going to see a bunch of pressure from us towards Poland to continue its decoupling from economic dependence in certain areas with China.
It really depends on the nature of the U.S. sanctions that would be brought forth, because obviously Europe wouldn't want to violate some of those in terms of creating damage to their own economies. Certainly China will try to reach out to Europe to see if they can't replace some of this, because this all comes at a bad time for China.
Biden's meeting with Xi at the APEC summit in Peru and a planned meeting later in the US will be the current president's final high-level US-China interactions. But experts doubt it will make much difference once Trump takes over.
And to Poland now, where Prime Minister Donald Tusk took to social media over the weekend to conduct an informal straw poll as his civic coalition prepares to hold its presidential primary on Friday. Poland's political scene is paying close attention to the vote. Our reporter Karolina Stolzman has more.
The battle for the Polish presidential palace, the palace that you see right behind me, is in full swing. And here are the top contenders for the office.
The two leading candidates both hail from the centrist civic coalition. Radosław Sikorski, currently Poland's foreign minister, and Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski. Both are running on national security and defense platform, but they differ in their approach.
I think this election is going to be about security, given the difficult international situation right now. I believe that the main issues will be prosperity and the economy, along with national security and defense, as well as healthcare.
In Poland, the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and his signature effectively turns bills into laws. He also holds veto power. But he cannot appoint ministers and has to cooperate with the government on matters of foreign policy. To help pick his party's candidate, Donald Tusk went down an unconventional road. The Polish official took to two social media platforms, X and Instagram, to find out who the Polish public is most likely to vote for. But the differing results hardly provide any clarity.
These are only sort of the artificial type of the measurement, and also sort of the instruction for them what they perhaps should do in order to go more deeply towards the better result.
The Civic Coalition will hold its presidential primary on November 22nd. Party members will cast their votes electronically. The results of the poll and the Civic Coalition's candidate for president will be announced the following day.
For the time being, definitely Sikorski seems to be more competent or more qualified because he's more experienced in that. If Trzaskowski wins, then Sikorski should give him his entire and total support to help. But if Sikorski wins, then Trzaskowski should also tell him what to do in order to be less costly, or let's say more classy.
The winner's greatest opponent will most likely be a candidate from the conservative opposition party, Law and Justice. The party hasn't selected their candidate yet, but its members remain hopeful.
Both of the Civic Coalition preliminary candidates can be easily defeated in the runoff of the presidential election.
Another significant player will be Szymon Hołownia, who, despite his role as the leader of the Poland 2050 political party, has come forward as an independent presidential candidate.
As Speaker of Parliament, Hołownia will be the one to announce the date for the presidential election. For now, we know that the candidates will fight for the presidential palace in May 2025. From Warsaw, for TVP World, Karolina Stolzman.
More on this subject soon after this edition of World News Online. Jovanka Jakubek-Lalik, Associate Professor of the Faculty of Law and Administration, University of Warsaw, will join us soon. Also, we will discuss the situation in Slovakia, where dissatisfied Slovaks gathered in Bratislava today to protest the government's views on Russia and the increasing prices impacting the lives of citizens. The demonstration is taking place on the 35th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution. Sonia Gata-Biszczan reports.
In 1989, thousands gathered across then Czechoslovakia to demand an end to communist rule. Because of its non-violent character, the event was labeled the Velvet Revolution. 35 years later, people have taken to the streets of Bratislava to voice their dissatisfaction with the government once again.
I feel that these freedoms are endangered by the current administration, and that it's super important that we stand again at those squares, that we still basically fight for this for freedom and democracy, the same way as in 1989.
A recent survey shows that 57% of Slovaks believe that democracy in the country is at risk, with corruption and poor political leadership being the main concerns. Much of this has to do with Prime Minister Robert Fico. Fico is said to admire both the Russian leader Vladimir Putin and Hungary's Viktor Orban. Some of his politics reflect pro-Russian sentiments and similar ideologies, particularly concerning media, the judiciary, and fundamental freedoms.
Concerning NATO, even if the parliament of each member country approves Ukraine's accession, and even if every NATO member country agrees, as long as I'm the Prime Minister of Slovakia, I will speak on behalf of Slovakia. Ukraine does not belong to NATO. This would further escalate tensions, which is not desirable.
Today is not the first time that Slovaks have united in protesting against Fico's leftist nationalist government. This is what the leader of Progressive Slovakia Party, Michal Šimečka, had to say during a protest in February.
There will never be an Orbanistan from Slovakia. In 100 days of Prime Minister Fico's government, the opposition, civil society, brave prosecutors, policemen, lawyers, students are united in squares all over Slovakia.
In May, Fico survived an assassination attempt, which he claimed was politically motivated. The general public condemned the act, and much in line with the Velvet Revolution, ordinary Slovaks put their faith in non-violent demonstrations.
And finally, Energa Camerimage International Film Festival in Toruń, Poland, is Europe's only major competition focusing on the art of cinematography. However, the start of the festival was not without controversy. Our reporter Karolina Szapland is there with more.
Energa Camerimage International Film Festival is in a full swing today here in Toruń, Poland. Some of the fans were really looking forward to the opening of an art installation starring Cate Blanchett, the star and the head of the jury of this year's festival. Cate Blanchett was gracing us from a screen of 13 arts installation, playing a variety of different characters, from a housewife to a homeless man, delivering political manifestos of the 20th century. But let's not forget, this film festival is all about movies. Movies such as White Courage or The Girl with the Needle by the Polish, Danish and Swedish artist. Let's see what Kazimierz Suwała, the director of the European Cinema Center, has got to say.
This year is a special place for cinematographers and young people. That's how this festival should be described. This is the festival we showing films to talk about art. We bringing guests to have conversations. We have the market to show technology. And we have lots of young people coming here for seminars, meetings, learning.
But what is at the heart of this festival is right behind me, and that is the talking shop of technology, young people meeting masters and looking for the latest developments in the art of cinematography. This year's edition of Camerimage was not without controversy, as prior to the opening of the festival, Marek Żydowicz, the festival's arts director, entered a public discussion with the British Society of Cinematographers over the role of women in cinematography. But discussion, debate, controversy or not, we are all waiting and looking towards the 23rd of November, where the winners of the bronze, silver and golden frog will be announced. For TVP World, I'm Karolina Shapland.
And we're coming back to the breaking news. President Joe Biden allows Ukraine to strike Russia with long-range U.S. missiles. That reports the New York Times, citing American officials. With 2 months left in office, the president, for the first time, authorized the Ukrainian military to use the system known as ATACMS to help defend its forces in the Kursk region of Russia. And joining me to discuss this topic is Jovanka Jakubek-Lalik, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Law and Administration at the University of Warsaw. Welcome. Good to have you, Jovanka.
Good evening. Thank you.
So, what is the weight of this long-awaited by the Ukrainian decision, and how can it change the spectrum of the war in Ukraine?
Well, we are in 1,000 days since Russia launched the full-scale military attack on Ukraine. So indeed, it seems to be a very important point of this war. And in 2 months, everybody can wake up in a different reality because of Donald Trump taking the office in the United States, which means that indeed there is not too much time to try to change the situation. Indeed, the decision of the American authorities seems to give Ukrainian government, Ukrainian army the leverage, the possibility to try to influence, to impact the situation, especially that Russian troops, also supported by North Korean troops, are making some gains in the operation against Ukrainian forces. So this seems to be a very crucial moment to indeed give this kind of additional possibilities to fight for the Ukrainian army.
So that would mean that you're expecting Donald Trump to overturn the decision taken today by Joe Biden?
Well, I'm expecting that something unexpected might happen, which means that Donald Trump could reverse this policy of the United States, but at the same time we can expect some other solutions, especially that many Republican Party members and members of Senate and House of Representatives are actually very supportive towards Ukraine. So Trump's presidency, still we don't know to what extent he will change the policies of the current American government, because Donald Trump claims that he will end this war very soon. However, still he did not explain how he's going to do that. And indeed, we still don't know how the situation might change since January.
Stunning dynamics, right? We just witnessed the phone call by Olaf Scholz talking to Putin. Now we are witnessing the decision taken by Joe Biden, even though for many, many months he's been sticking to the Sullivan Doctrine, not allowing Ukrainians to strike back deep in the Russian territory. So what might have been the influence, the direct influence for Joe Biden to taking such a decision in your mind?
Well, of course, we don't know everything. We don't have all the information that the American president has access to when he's making this kind of decisions. What we know is that indeed we are expecting the change in power in American politics, which also will for sure influence the situation in the Russian-Ukrainian war. To what extent and in which direction, we are still not certain.
We don't know because we have not heard yet any confirmation or comments from the Ukrainian side and Ukrainian authorities, but we might imagine that the Ukrainians are ready, as they have been pushing for months to be granted such a decision. So do you think they are ready? They only have 2 months left.
Indeed, they have been pushing and they were expecting this kind of decision. So I would also expect that the leaders of the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian government has some scenarios ready to use this kind of weapons. But again, we still lack precise information to assess to what extent those kind of operations could be successful.
Okay, so remains to be seen. This is a huge information indeed, and remains to be seen what can happen in hours to come. And now, if you permit, if I may, we will come back to Warsaw, to Poland, where the Civic Platform and Civic Coalition is organizing and starting a pre-run election inside the party, thinking about who is better suited to handle the uncertain times ahead. So this question members of Poland Civic Coalition are asking themselves today. The Friday, they plan to announce their nominee for president ahead of the election in May next year. And the big question remains Trzaskowski or Sikorski. Both seem pro-European, pro-American. They have similar views on most of the issues politically. So how do they differ?
Well, both candidates are, let's say, very well prepared to take this position. Both have a very good international experience, also domestic experience in policies. I think that what is actually about this primaries in the Civic Platform is try to also make the situation more dynamic, to make also the electorate more interested in these elections. Because let's not forget that Poland is in last months actually experiencing one electoral campaign after the other. So we started in late 2023 with the parliamentary elections, then we had local elections, which were also very important, and then the elections to the European Parliament. So this is, let's say, election number 4, which is again of a crucial importance. So we need to, let's say, make the electorate still interested and ready to vote and try to gain support to the party candidates. So indeed, the situation, I think, might provide some more dynamics to how the candidates are perceived, and also what Prime Minister and the party leader Donald Tusk has explained. If any of the candidates win, he will be supported by all the strength of the party and the leaders. So it is not, let's say, the competition indeed between the two, which might affect the final result, but more, let's say, try to find the best candidate to suit the expectations of the electorate.
As you rightly pointed out, it's the 4th election in Poland and the second duel of Trzaskowski and Sikorski, because 4 years ago they also they had this duel, in fact, inside the party, and Sikorski lost to Rafał Trzaskowski in the CPE primaries. Sikorski claims today that times have changed. Do you think he can win this time?
Well, it remains to be seen. I think that both of the candidates, Rafał Trzaskowski and Radosław Sikorski, they have very substantial support. Of course, it will probably depend whom we ask, and we will have different opinions, which might prove to be a better leader. However, both of them, again, are very experienced politicians, and it will for sure, whoever will be chosen by the party members in these primaries will have the proper qualifications to lead the country.
Qualifications for certain, but it remains to be seen who can win with another candidate. For example, or of the peace, right? Peace contender. We don't know the name yet, but who has more chance of winning against a peace candidate in your view? There's also the third way speaker of the same, Szymon Hołownia candidate. So who is better suited to confront one of them?
As you mentioned, we still don't know who is going to the opposition candidate in this presidential elections. So without this knowledge, it is very difficult to assess which candidate will be, let's say, better equipped to win in these elections. So I think that the situation is still quite dynamic, and we need to wait until the, let's say, full list of the candidates will be ready. And then again, the situation situation in the United States, the global situation, the security issues, I think there are so many determinants that we are still not aware how they will be changing throughout the way, that the situation might be very, very different in 2-3 months from now. So every party that is competing in this election, in every candidate which is competing in this election, they need to make very cautious decisions and also properly prepare their agenda and what they will provide in the election campaign in order for the people to trust them with this very important with this very important presidential office.
The decision is to be taken on Friday next week and the announcement on Saturday. Thank you very much, Jovanka Jakubek-Lalik. Thank you for your comments and for your insight. And this concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Make sure to stay with TVP World for more news and features. Thank you for watching.